The land of fairy story is wide and deep and high. Its seas are shoreless and its stars uncounted. Its beauty and enchantment, and its peril ever present. Both joy and sorrow are poignant as a sword. In that land a man may, perhaps, count himself fortunate to have wandered, but its very mystery and wealth make dumb the traveler who would report. And while he is there, it is dangerous for him to ask too many questions, lest the gates be shut and the keys be lost. Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we are going to try something a bit different and look at some of the broader mysteries throughout Tolkien's works and address the main theories and ideas about them that attempt to answer them that are out there, as well as my thoughts about them and which ideas I believe in the most. A few things first, I'll link articles that address these mysteries and helped me make this video, along with other videos of mine in which I further discuss these ideas in the description and cards, so check out all of that for more information and where these questions come from. And I'm sure there will be many more sources out there that discuss these things as well that I have not found. Furthermore, we won't have solid answers to really any of these questions, likely ever, as Tolkien intended for there to be mysteries in his works, but it is fun to discuss them, and if you'd all like a part 2 to this video, as I won't be able to address every mystery here, just let me know. My friends, thank you all so much for being here and for joining me. Let's begin our tale. Question 1. Who/what are Tom Bombadil and Goldberry? Why is he immune to the ring? Is she? Once again, these questions are pulled right from the sources in the description, so check those out, but we'll start with this big one. I looked a bit at this years ago in my Tom Bombadil video, and have thought about it since, so Tom Bombadil and Goldberry are interestingly different from any other powers or people we see in the entire Legendarium. We can be sure that they are not Maiar or Valar or anything like that, as they are not affected by the effects of the One Ring. At least we know Tom Bombadil is not, whereas other Maiar and perhaps Valar even would be affected by the ring, and the Valar are all accounted for as well. Tom is said to be the oldest and fatherless, being one of, if not the oldest being in Middle-earth itself, drawing not only this similarity with Treebeard, but many others as well. Furthermore, we can trust Tom to be a reliable character when he speaks to his own life, as he seems to have no reason to outwardly lie, and is powerful and purely good enough as a character to not want to lie about himself or his past. He's very authentic. So where does this leave us? Well, looking at Goldberry, I believe that her origin is a bit more rooted in the natural powers of nature and water, as she is known as the River Daughter. Perhaps she is a primordial force of the nature of Arda, as a manifestation of the nature of the river in the Old Forest, while Tom similarly is the manifestation of the natural power of the Old Forest in an also primordial sense. Where that puts them in relation to the Valar in terms of power, I'm not sure, as Tom is also associated with music, which we know is a powerful force in the Legendarium due to the music of the Ainur. I've also heard theories that say Tom is the personification of the music of the Ainur, or that he is Iru's personification in Middle-earth. And while I do like the former theory about him being the music the most, I actually don't think he or Goldberry are meant to be taken that literally, in fact. If I were to hazard a guess about them and their nature, the two serve as archetypes and the personifications of the good power of the Old Forest and its waters, as the forest used to be connected to the Fangorn and the forests of Beleriand, perhaps being the oldest and grandest forest in the Old World. Tom and Goldberry are ever only in and near the Old Forest, with Tom going furthest to the Barrow Downs. And it seems their powers are those associated with the primordial good of nature, whereas something like Old Man Willow is perhaps the more wild or untamed and chaotic power of the forest. Thus, my best guess is that they are the personified manifestation of the woods and river of the Old Forest, the pure good of Arda and its nature, which was created by the music and shaped by the Valar before the marring of Arda by Melkor and his evil. And perhaps that's why the ring doesn't affect them. It's because their power is so good and primordial that it's beyond the touch of the marring of Arda, of Melkor, or Sauron, or any of their works. Question 2. What did the Blue Wizards accomplish? Concerning the Blue Wizards, I go into a far more thorough analysis and explanation in their epic character's history. But for what we are looking for here, I actually believe I have a more specific and correct answer for this question than I did for the Tom Bombadil one. For a bit of backstory with these characters, besides Saruman the White, Gandalf the Grey, and Radagast the Brown, there were two Blue Wizards, Alatar and Polando, who either arrived in the early Third Age or the mid-Second Age, depending on where in the lore we look. And even while Tolkien himself was not sure what they ended up doing, he toyed with the idea that they perhaps went east and fell under the sway of Sauron, being involved in magic cults of the East. His later notes, however, seem to suggest that the Blue Wizards likely aided the West in some manner that we know not against the Dark Lord. And while they failed to find Sauron in the east, maybe the victory of the Free Peoples at the end of the Third Age with the downfall of Sauron could only be achieved through their actions. In my mind, I imagine that although they did not achieve their specific task given to them by the Valar to the extent that Gandalf did, the Blue Wizards helped the people of the East resist Sauron as much as they could, although his shadows still conquered the people of the East in a major way. Through their unknown efforts, we can assume that without their aid, the West would not have achieved victory at the Battle of the Black Gate with the destruction of the Ring and so forth. Not much more may be said about them, but I do like to think that there are wonderful tales and adventures which they were major parts of that we do not know due to the geographical location of our frame narrative authors in Middle-earth, the Hobbits. Question 3. Where did Maglor go? After his brother Maithros took a Silmaril into the earth with his death, Maglor became the last living son of Feanor in Middle-earth, whereas once there were 7. He cast the last Silmaril into the sea near the end of the First Age, and it is said that Maglor went on to wander the shores of the sea, singing laments of his despair and regret. Perhaps he still wandered the shores of the sea in later ages, singing his songs, but perhaps he also went on to enter into other stories and deeds in lands far away. Despite his evil deeds, Maglor had done some good in his life, having fostered Elrond and Elros after the Third Kinslaying, and the journey west of Eärendil and Elwing, their parents. I imagine that if Maglor ever came into contact with either of them or their people again, or any who really knew this tale, he would be treated with honor and respect, at least somewhat, since he still did commit kinslayings, perhaps brought to a place like Lindon or Rivendell or Númenor. But I imagine he left the western lands of Middle-earth, going to places where none would know him or of his plight. While he likely remained alone during his wanderings alongside the sea, he could have traveled along the sea to the lands of the east and south and met with dark elves. However, while Maglor of all the Feanorian sons likely regretted the oath of Feanor to pursue the Silmarils the most, he was perhaps still bound to this oath, and though he cast his Silmaril into the ocean, he had no other option than to look for the Silmarils still, perhaps being stuck in some sort of purgatory unless he became an Oathbreaker and was subject to a far worse fate than being stuck in the Oath, perhaps. His future after the First Age will always be a subtle yet interesting mystery in the world of Middle-earth, especially seeing that he was a very powerful elf, and son of one of the most powerful and renowned elves in the entire history of the world. It is interesting to think about what may have happened to him or where he may have gone, what stories he may have ended up being part of. Perhaps he saw the Corsair invasions of southern Gondor during the War of the Ring, or perhaps he even participated in some unknown way in the later stories of the world. We can't be sure. Question 4. What happens to men when they die? Is it different for evil men? From what I can tell, we can derive a general idea of the answer to this question from Tolkien and his faith. Men were not bound to the circles of the world in Middle-earth, nor to linger forever within them, and even in the halls of Mandos, if need be, like the elves were. For all men went to the halls of Mandos after their deaths, before passing on beyond them, to where only few beings in all of creation could guess, and only one, Iru Ilúvatar, knew for certain. I believe that, based on Professor Tolkien's Catholic faith, and how his religion influenced the metaphysics in his writings, and especially the Silmarillion, and how his religion influenced the way that he wrote about philosophy and theology, especially pertaining to men and death throughout the works, it is likely that men went beyond Arda to the halls of Ilúvatar, where the music of the Ainur was made, and it acted as a heaven of sorts. This was probably part of the gift of Ilúvatar, not understood by those who feared mortal death in Middle-earth, that they would pass beyond the grief and sorrow of death to go to a heaven of sorts as spirits to live alongside Iru himself. Seeing that the gift of Ilúvatar could not be taken away but only delayed for a time, like we see with the Nazgul, I believe that even men of evil could either go there or to a realm set apart for them, like to Melkor in the Void beyond the walls of Arda, that they could embrace the master of the evil they dedicated themselves to until a Dagor-Daggerath kind of event, if such a thing were to happen, where they could perhaps fight for Melkor or, in the last, redeem themselves and turn against him. But as for most men, for good men, especially the faithful and for those who held tradition, I believe they rejoined Iru in his halls as though it were a Catholic heaven, again drawing upon Tolkien's faith and how he wrote about such things in Arda. Question 5. Do orcs have spirits or fear? What is their ultimate fate? Do they have free will? These questions definitely deserve a video by themselves to expand on the ideas here, and while there is much we can look at and analyze, I will keep this as concise as possible. From what I can tell, the presence of the orcs, beings that were irredeemable and wholly evil, were actually a bit of an ethical and philosophical conundrum for Tolkien and his convictions. But I believe we can find an answer to all of this that settles the ethics and debates about these questions. In the History of Middle-earth books, we can gather lore that argues the spirits or Fëanor of elves can leave their bodies or Hrora with some level of free choice from the elves themselves, and I would imagine especially under great duress. Both the body and spirit of an elf are important, and if separated, the elven spirit may return to the halls of Mandos to await physical reincarnation by the Valar. Now, I may be completely wrong about this next part, so let me know your thoughts on this theory and all others in this video, and I may issue a correction in the comments and/or future videos. I believe that when Melkor took some of the first elves and perverted and mutilated them into orcs, I imagine that under this duress, the elven spirits departed their hosts, either remaining in that land where they were captured and perverted, or going to Valinor, and some evil non-entity, as it were, took its place in the husk that used to be the elven host, becoming an orc, whose actions and spirits are more directly or indirectly controlled by the Dark Lord they served. As an aside to this, I actually also personally believe that the dragons of Middle-earth carried the malice and essence of Morgoth, but did not have true free will or life, rather being the drones of the Dark Lord. I believe orcs behaved in a similar way, as all of this comes from the fact that Melkor did not have access to the flame imperishable, that which grants free will and true life in Arda, as that was with Eru and the creation of Ea. He was never able to find that, so Melkor was never truly able to create, only pervert, mutilate, corrupt, and mock. And so, if orcs did not have free will or true life, they went on as husks, inhabited by evil, carrying out the will of their masters and populating in the manner of men, as it is reported in the History of Middle-earth volumes. As for their fate after the falls of Morgoth and Sauron, I believe the lack of will and direction made them as scattered beasts, who only carried the former will of their masters but did not really have any sense of purpose or direction, and were slain in the Age of Men, which, if this theory is true, could be as a mercy to them, or maybe it wasn't, as perhaps they didn't really feel or do anything as they weren't really alive. I'm not sure. Again, I could be entirely wrong, and perhaps this debate is more interesting than what this answer provides for, but that would solve these issues. Let me know what you all think about this conundrum in the comments below. Question 6. What were the nameless things under Moria? This is one that I will cover relatively quickly, but please look back on my video on these creatures for more information. In the Two Towers, Gandalf mentions that, during his fight with the Balrog, after he fell from the bridge of Khazad-dum, the two Maiar made their way through tunnels under Moria, carved and gnawed by the ancient nameless things of the world, and they are implied to be chaotic or evil creatures. My best guess is, like whenever there are mysteries about evil things in Middle-earth, Melkor is somehow involved. I imagine that since these creatures are so far beneath the surface of the earth, they were there in the ancient days, during the creation and molding of Arda's surface by the Valar. In his opposition in the First War of the Gods, the War of the Powers, Melkor had opposed Aule's molding of the world, and he could have done this by also creating these not really alive creatures, but ones that gnawed upon the earth and changed the roots of the world, again without true life or free will. Melkor's actions caused much geographical change to occur in the world, even long after its creation, with new mountain ranges, regions, and so forth, like when he rose the Misty Mountains himself to get in the way of Orome the Hunter. So I imagine the nameless things are lifeless beasts of chaos that change and gnaw upon the roots of Aule's realm, the earth and stone. That would be my best guess, but there are many more theories for the nameless things that are out there. Question 7. What happened to the Entwives? Finally, for today, we will wrap up by discussing the Entwives. Like with some of these other topics, please check out my video on the Entwives and what happened to them for more details. Based on what we know from the Entwives, they preferred more open spaces where they could make gardens and interact with many different creatures and plants, and they liked less the inner forests as their husbands did. So Ents and Entwives would actually grow physically further apart until the Entwives were gone and they never returned. Based on what I have learned, I do not believe that the Entwives would permanently leave on their own, never having entings with their husbands again. I'm not sure why they would choose to do such a thing, and I don't believe they in fact would. I do believe, however, that they all, or most of them, went to places in the east near Ælfwine, and such places were destroyed by the forces of Sauron, especially during the War of the Last Alliance at the end of the Second Age. We do know that there were great gardens of the Entwives in the Brownlands, which were devastated by Sauron during the war to slow the advances of the host of the West, from the north to the south. I believe that the Entwives all perished during this war, for they were beings of nature, love, peace, and growth, things that are all of which corrupted or destroyed in war. And I believe this is no different. It is probable that, if there were any Ent-like beings in Eriador or anywhere else beyond the Fangorn after this, they were likely Horns and not quite Ents, for the time of the Ents was coming to an end. Again, like with any of my theories, I could be wrong, and perhaps some Entwives survived in the East or elsewhere, but with the wars of Sauron, I do doubt it, unfortunately. From these theories, we see just how much mystery adds intrigue to the world, and while we can attempt to solve mysteries, we must acknowledge and respect their value. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this different kind of video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts on any of these questions or theories? Do you agree with what I have said, or do you believe I missed some things? Please let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you'd like a part 2 on some of the less known mysteries of Middle-earth. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles through the link in the description below. I've recently tried the newer candles called The Ring and I Am No Man, and I would highly recommend those as well. So please check those out, and our merch and Patreon in the description below. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralik, Blair Scouten, Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Matt Sabach, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Adam Petrlik, Anthony Harmon, Dwarwin Gray, Arthur Merlin, DJ Vaught, Dale Davis, and Alex Grimes, and King's Wild Project, our newest Valar tier patron. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next Sunday with a video on what happened during the downfall of Numenor. You all are the best, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.